You can't preach brotherhood and doing things together, sacrificing as a group while simultaneously shielding your medically cleared quarterback. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network in the world. And I am David Harrison, your guy on the ground, covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9 and Commanders on SI. You can also follow me on X at DHarrison82, Instagram at DHarrison_82. And of course, I'm here with you 5 days a week, all throughout the year, including the season and the offseason. Coming up on today's episode, the Washington Commanders offense remains functionally broken until Terry McLaurin and or Jayden Daniels gets back on the field. And did the Commanders mess up with Emmanuel Forbes? But first, we're going to start off this mailbag episode talking about the fact that you can't preach togetherness, brotherhood, joint sacrificing, while also shielding your medically cleared quarterback, Jayden Daniels, from the field and from some of those sacrifices. All that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's mailbag episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers to FanDuel, you bet just $5, and if that first bet wins, you will get $300 in bonus bets to use anywhere across the FanDuel app. Highly recommend taking advantage of that if you have not already. So there's a little bit of a paradox when it comes to the idea that Dan Quinn should shelve Jayden Daniels. We continue to have this conversation because it continues to be a topic of conversation. And bottom line is, as far as we sit here on Locked On Commanders, you can't preach brotherhood. You can't preach togetherness, battling together and all that kind of stuff when you're simultaneously shielding your franchise quarterback who is medically cleared, when he is medically cleared, to play in battle from that very field of battle that his teammates are going to be on and potentially going to be losing games that you know you would have a better chance to win with Jayden Daniels on the field. Because bottom line is, as much as we like Marcus Mariota here, as much as we think he is a very serviceable veteran backup for sure, I don't think the team has zero chance to win with him on the field. There is no doubt that even in his youth, even with some of the growth he still needs to experience in his career, the Washington Commanders are better off when Jayden Daniels is on the field than anyone else. So the question coming in from multiple insiders here: can Dan Quinn preach brotherhood if he holds Jayden out after being medically cleared to play? That was the question posed. Insider Merle came in and no, the answer straight up no. We're going to get into why, but no, obviously you can't. There's a culture clash here if you do something like that. Dan Quinn didn't establish the brotherhood, right? When we talk about the culture and all that kind of stuff, Dan Quinn came in, so we want to establish a culture of being aggressive, getting down, with intention and doing all these things. But ultimately, he let the team create the standards, the team's leaders, right? Guys like Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz, Terry McLaurin, etc. Jayden Daniels, obviously, as the starting quarterback for this team, being one of those leaders, not only created their own kind of mantra and their own kind of operating procedure within themselves, but they also are in charge of upholding it. And that is where the paradox or the hypocrisy of the idea of leaving Jayden Daniels on the bench to protect him from hits, to protect him from a fourth injury this season, really doesn't fit the mold of what the Washington Commanders are trying to be. And it's why not only has the opinion here on Locked On Commanders been from the start that when he is healthy, when he is cleared, he should play, but also the opinion of the team. If you listen to Dan Quinn talk, if you listen to Jayden Daniels talk, I mean, you listen to Joe Theismann talk. We did an interview with him in Spain. Like, everybody is going to tell you the same thing, that competitors compete. Even Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow did a press conference earlier this week and was asked, why do you want to come back? Yeah, there's an outside chance the Bengals make the playoffs, but ultimately the odds are not good in their favor. And he said, I'm a football player. That's what I do. I play football. And that's about as simple as you can boil it down, to be quite honest with you. Is you can't say you're a football player and then not play football, right? It's like me saying, well, I'm a podcaster, but I don't do podcasts. It does not make sense. And when you look around at the team around Jayden Daniels, how do you then go tell Terry McLaurin? How do you then go tell Jacory Croskey-Merritt? How do you then go tell any of these guys, hey, we need you to step up. We need you to go out there, put your body on the line, put the physicality on the line, go out there and give it your all for the team, for the brotherhood, But by the way, we're going to keep this one brother in the sense of the brother. We're going to keep him out of the action because obviously he's more important. It's not that nobody understands that the quarterback is obviously more important, but the bottom line is if you have a quarterback who is fully medically cleared to play, able to play as himself, by himself, or whatever it is, and you then shield him from that risk, you definitely risk, I think, the erosion of the brotherhood, of the standard, of all those things going on in the locker room. And so far, even through the struggles, even through the losses, you don't see that erosion. You see a team that is very much put together, a team that very much supports each other, a team that very much is trying to fix everything going on as a group. You do this, and I think it erodes it. The good news is I don't think we really have that risk. So I wanted to, but it was a different angle. It's a different part of the conversation that we have not had yet here on the program. So that was a really good question from Merle. I appreciate that question. Insider Friend also came through. Basically just said, is Jayden Daniels fully healthy? Is he healthy enough to play? So health is a little bit relative, right? I've had the conversation with a lot of people. Healthy as a general human being is different than healthy as a football player. Is Jayden Daniels healthy as a human being? Yeah, I think he generally speaking is. Is he healthy as a football player? No, and that's where Dan Quinn kind of comes in. Hasn't been medically cleared for contact, and it's kind of a weird specification to bring in because quarterbacks don't get contacted, aren't supposed to get contacted in practice anyway, right? But really what it is that medical diagnosis, right? It's if you're not cleared for contact, that also means we don't want you playing in the games. And, if you're not cleared for contact coming into Wednesday's practice, et cetera, do we really want to risk putting you out there Sunday? That is where the health consideration has to come in. That's why I think Minnesota Vikings is probably the most likely place we're going to see Jayden Daniels come back. I kind of have been on that path since the beginning of this injury, and especially since they decided not to put him on injured reserve. So no, from an athlete football perspective, he is not fully healthy at this time. However, he is clear to start getting back ramped up with the team, and I think that is what you'll start seeing here on Wednesday. Dan Quinn saying that on Monday they got a little bit of work in, and that's what he was able to do, was get some throws in. Jayden said he was getting some throws in, but if you also, and it's funny actually, it is very anecdotal, right? But I kind of talked about this on the radio in DC when asked about Jayden Daniels' status. I said, look, the Washington Commanders held their 24th annual Harvest Fest where they handed out 2,500 bags of groceries to families in and around the Prince George's County area. And Jayden Daniels was out there. He was out there in public. He was out there meeting fans, taking pictures with people, talking to the media, doing all those things. And it's just like one of those things where like teams don't really put their players out there like that when that they're still like they're not going to want Jayden Daniels out there in a sling doing that kind of stuff. So I was like, that's a good sign, right? Again, it's very anecdotal, which means it's not like hard fact. It's not, evidence, anything like that. It's very, very much kind of contextual, circumstantial, right? But it is something. It's not nothing. However, if you saw him out there, if you've seen videos of him out there handing out bags, it was very obvious that he was making sure to not use his left hand. In fact, his mother, Regina, his manager, his agent, was actually handing him the bags of groceries across his body to his right hand to prevent him from using his left arm. So it kind of just shows you that there's still something there. So yeah, as he's working through it, and it's a non-throwing arm, so you can get out there, get the throws in, get the footwork in, do all those kinds of things. You do it in a controlled environment. That's one thing. But I think for this weekend, no, he's not healthy. He's not going to be medically cleared to play. So definitely don't expect to see him against the Denver Broncos. Looking forward to potentially seeing him come back against the Minnesota Vikings. If not then I think certainly week, what would it be then, 15 against the New York Giants. So as we look at that potential paradox that the team is going to avoid, there is a little bit of a stinging irony happening right now where Washington let go of a young corner who couldn't tackle and ended up actually replacing him with a veteran who, at least for the most part, until he got hurt, couldn't really cover. That conversation coming up next on today's mailbag episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at Peloton. Look, folks, it's time to break through the busiest time of the year with a brand new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus that's powered by Peloton IQ. It's Peloton's most elevated technology and equipment yet that gives you real-time guidance, and it gives you endless ways to move, whether you want to work out by yourself or if you want to work out with your favorite instructor, like my personal favorite, Alex Toussaint. He always gets me fired up to tackle the day. And the thing I like about Peloton, it helps me achieve more in less times. They have features that help you plan, stay motivated, track your progress, and Peloton IQ also provides personalized workout plans and recommendations. That's something that I use right now during the busiest time of the year covering the NFL. They plan my workouts for me based on my mood, my vibe, and also my favorite instructors. So make sure you check it out and use it because it also helps you correct your form in real time and it maximizes your reps. It counts your reps so that you can do it smarter, safer, and more efficient. Let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus at One Peloton.
Thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or your first view today. To the everydayers, those of you who come through for every single episode, a special thank you goes out to you for coming through for yet another one today. For everybody helping to make Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. There's a stinging irony floating around the Washington Commanders right now where young Emmanuel Forbes was allowed to walk away from the Washington Commanders, considered a first-round bust. All of those, labels and connotations that come from it, largely in part because he couldn't play physical, couldn't tackle, and then they essentially replaced him with veteran Marshon Lattimore via trade. And at least before his injury this season, really kind of struggled in the coverage department. So kind of getting rid of a guy for one thing, only to bring in another guy who couldn't do the other thing. Insider Fran posed the question, since Emmanuel Forbes is doing well with the Los Angeles Rams, do we wish that Emmanuel Forbes was still with the Washington Commanders? Is he now better than Marshon Lattimore? So I think the overall answer is going to be no, he's not better than Marshon Lattimore. And no, I don't think that he should still be in Washington. Now, before we get into this conversation, I definitely want to make sure it's clear. Super happy for Emmanuel Forbes. Really enjoyed the time that he was here. Good dude, good young man. Look, it's hard when you're a first-round draft pick and you're not doing well. Jahan Dotson went through it here. Emmanuel Forbes went through it here. Guys go through it. It's part of the gig. It's unfortunately it's not the part that you intentionally sign up for. But when you come into this league and you come into a highly touted, it is what you sign up for, whether you really wanted to or not. It's kind of like you got to sign for certain things and agree to terms for I don't even know what, but certain things that you don't really want to agree to. But if you don't agree to them, you don't get access to what you're getting access to. So it's kind of the same thing, right? But the bottom line is I don't think Emmanuel Forbes is having the success that he's had recently in Los Angeles if he's still in Washington for several things. Now let's look at the comparative, right? Because that's what everybody's doing is we're looking at the comparative. The Marshon Lattimore reality check. So his 2025 performance before his season ending injury, Marshon Lattimore clearly was not having the greatest coverage season, having a pretty poor coverage season, as was the entire defense, right? It wasn't just isolated to Marshon Lattimore. Now, he did have an elite performance in week 8, which is ironic because it was kind of close to the time that he would end up getting lost for the rest of the season. But overall, was consistently below average in preventing completions and allowing quarterbacks to kind of have their way targeting him on the field of play. His physicality, he relied a dependable tackler as far as cornerback standards are concerned. You knew that he was going to play physical. He was going to have that dog in him. And obviously, sometimes that dog also turned into 15-yard penalties and all kinds of things like that. And when you're not covering all that well and you're drawing penalties, you're committing fouls and doing all these things, people aren't necessarily going to appreciate you as much. So as solid as he was in run support, not a lot of missed tackles this season, which he's credited for, which is, something that the Commanders' overall defense has struggled with. The physical floor was good. The coverage ceiling was not as good, and that is obviously where the disappointment with Marshon Lattimore came in, and ultimately where I think the overall opinion or the overall, thought process about Marshon Lattimore is that he's probably played his last snap as a Washington Commander. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but there's a significant amount of money left on his contract that is non-guaranteed. So the Washington Commanders, by releasing him, or if you can trade him for, a 7th-round pick, 6th-round pick, something like that, if someone's interested, go out there and get a little bit of draft capital back. I don't think that's going to happen. I think you're just going to release him, get that money back, and Marshon is going to be free to kind of sign wherever he wants. Who knows? He might go to Denver and rejoin Sean Payton. He might go back to New Orleans. He might go, who knows, Cleveland Browns. I don't know. He played for Ohio State. I don't know how much love he has for the state of Ohio, but there's always an option there, right? So that's Marshon Lattimore in 2025. Now, Emmanuel Forbes in 2025. He's currently playing basically the opposite style in Los Angeles. So he's lately, especially, playing a high level, near shutdown level of coverage significantly better than Marshon Lattimore's level of coverage, including giving up 0 completions on what was, I think it was 7 attempts from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just this last weekend, which is where all this attention is coming from because everybody noticed that. And obviously now the question comes up, oh, did the Washington Commanders mess up? But he is still a massive liability physically, right? He's a massive liability in run support. He's a massive liability when it comes to playing physical type coverage, which is the mantra, which is the method that the Washington Commanders want to play with. They want physicality. They want guys that can tackle. They want all of that kind of stuff. So the bottom line is, and this is the reason it didn't work out in the first place, is Emmanuel Forbes simply doesn't fit the mold of what the Washington Commanders defense wants. Now, is it possible that the Washington Commanders defensive mold needs to shift a little bit? Sure. Is it possible that Emmanuel Forbes maybe just is a victim of circumstance? He was drafted into one defense, remember, and then the new defense came in. So it's not even an indictment on Emmanuel Forbes per se, when you just have a guy who kind of fits a specific theme, specific mold, specific style of play, and the style of play that your team wants changes. And that's kind of the hard part about defense is we talk about adjustments. We talk about shifting the scheme to like do what guys do best, but like you have 11 guys and the defense really is 11 guys operating as one. So you can't necessarily craft the defense to customize to each individual player. What you have to do is kind of say, who are my guys collectively? How do I make that the best? And honestly, it's a lot of things that defense coordinators typically don't do. Typically what you do as defense coordinator, you say, here's the defense we want to mold. General manager, scouts, personnel department, go find me players that fit this mold because the mold is harder to craft than the players, if that makes sense. So, no, I don't think Emmanuel Forbes will be doing what he's doing here. And truthfully, and this is why I kind of preemptively, set up this conversation with the fact that, I think that what Emmanuel Forbes went through here in Washington was tough. I think he handled it really well, very professionally. Clearly, I mean, he honestly has some opportunities to try to clap back at people and do all these things and be a little bit unprofessional, and he never did. So I really respected that for him. Truthfully, there's also an element here of what the defense in Los Angeles provides to Emmanuel Forbes. The pass rush is a lot better in Los Angeles than it is here in Washington. And again, like I said, they don't ask him to play the line of scrimmage. They don't ask him to do these things. There's a lot more guys. They play a little bit of what's commonly referred to as penny coverage, which is or a penny scheme, which is 5 defensive linemen, 1 linebacker, and then the rest of you are DBs. And you don't always bring all 5 or all 6 of those front 6 guys. You're commonly dropping guys back. It leaves fewer lanes, fewer opportunities, and it requires Emmanuel Forbes as a quarterback in that system to cover less ground as well. Again, the Washington Commanders, they like to run kind of a cover 3. They like to run that kind of 3-3-5 type of mentality of a defense, even when they're in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-man front, things like that. And a lot of times they're asking their DBs to cover a lot more ground. It's a lot harder. The other part of this conversation has to be this growth and this great play that you're seeing from Emmanuel Forbes is very recent. If you go back to the early part of the season, first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, Emmanuel Forbes is still doing essentially what he did here in Washington, giving up triple-digit quarterback passer ratings against, giving up a lot of completions. Like he was picked apart by the Tennessee Titans. Rookie quarterback Cam Ward gave up a 100-plus quarter or passer rating, gave up a touchdown in that game. So this is also a very recent development for Emmanuel Forbes, which I hope continues because, again, I like Emmanuel. I think that he's a good kid. He deserves all the success in the world, but it is not just all Emmanuel Forbes just boom, locking in as a shutdown corner either. So just remember that. So do we wish we had Emmanuel Forbes back? I can't speak for everybody, just for me. No, I think he's better off where he is. I think he needed the change. I think he needed the change in scenery, the change in scheme, and I'm glad that it's working out for him. Is he better than Lattimore for this defense? No, he's not. He would have been worse for this defense. But I think either way, Emmanuel Forbes, you throw Benjamin St. Juste in that conversation. Marshon Lattimore clearly did not work out, not working out. So you bring in Trey Amos this offseason, and then we'll see what they do moving forward in the 2026 offseason. So they wanted to get a shutdown guy, drafting Emmanuel Forbes in the first round. They wanted to get a shutdown guy, training for Marshon Lattimore. Neither of them turned out to be a shutdown guy. The mission, the investigation, whatever it is, the journey to try to find the quest. That's a better word. The quest to find a shutdown cornerback continues for the Washington Commanders. Maybe it's Trey Amos. I don't know, but maybe it's whoever they bring in 2026. Shifting back to the offensive side to wrap up today's episode, we can debate the running back depth chart all day. We certainly have all season long, but the reality is this offense does not hum unless it has Terry McLaurin and or Jayden Daniels back on the field. The team could be getting one of those guys back this week. We'll dive deeper into that conversation coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing that thanks to our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back. The NFL is rolling forward. And no matter what game, what league you're watching, there is no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And the amazing offer they've had really all season long is still on the table. New customers to FanDuel bet $5. If that first $5 bet wins, you then get $300 in bonus bets to use anywhere on the app. Even if you miss the start of a game, you miss kickoff, you miss tip-off, whatever it is, you turn it on, it's the second quarter, whatever game you're watching, and you're like, man, this dude is on fire. I'm going to put money on that guy to continue to be on fire. Or maybe you think a fourth quarter rally comeback is coming and you want to put money on that. You can even stack your bets in the same game parlay every day. You know I love my same game parlays. You get a shot at a bigger payout, and it keeps every game exciting, whether it's your favorite team in action or it's two teams that you don't have investment in. It makes the game better. Right now, again, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We can debate the running back depth chart. We can debate all kinds of stuff. Does the Washington Commanders team need a new tight end? Should Ben Sinnott get more reps? So the bottom line is this offense is going to continue to struggle to produce consistently until either Terry McLaurin or Jayden Daniels gets back on the field. Jayden Daniels not expected to be back this weekend, but could Terry McLaurin be trending in the right direction? Full disclosure, before we have this conversation, we are headed to practice for the first time since the bye week today on Wednesday after I record this episode, after I put this episode out. However, we've already been told by Dan Quinn, Terry McLaurin getting ramped up back into practice. Insider Tia came through and asked about Terry, said, how is Terry McLaurin doing? Expectations for his return. I think there's positive momentum is the best way to put it. I still put it at about a 40% chance that Terry McLaurin plays this weekend. But that, again, is before I see him, before we get to talk to him, potentially do all these kinds of things. The bye week gives rest for him, gives rest for everybody else. We already saw him working up just a little bit with trainers in Madrid a couple of weeks ago. Now he's got a little bit more time. And again, when players kind of start to be visible with their workouts and their rehab, that's when you kind of know they're starting to get a little bit closer. So expect maybe a little limited participant early on in practice in week 13 here for the Denver Broncos, but that does not necessarily mean that he won't play, can't play, get back on the field this weekend against the Denver Broncos. And if he does, I think just like the Kansas City Chiefs, I know he aggravated that quad against the Chiefs, but we saw this offense against the Kansas City Chiefs look much, much better, even with Marcus Mariota in at quarterback. Moving to that running back room, Bill versus C-Rod. Insider Joy came through, asked for my thoughts on Bill, Jacory Croskey-Merritt being elite versus Chris Rodriguez not being elite. I guess this is a conversation Joy heard on some other podcasts. I don't know exactly which one. I don't know who it was. But basically saying that Chris Rodriguez is good right now, is a good tone setter, all that kind of stuff, but does not have that elite ceiling, whereas Jacory Croskey-Merritt has that elite ceiling. I think the reason that kind of comes out is, look, bottom line is Bill has more wiggle to him, right? He's more of a one cut type of back. Chris Rodriguez Jr., meanwhile, is much more of a straight line, hit the gap, hit the contact, get upfield, do all those kinds of things. But I don't necessarily think you should underestimate Chris Rodriguez's eyes. I think his eyes are a little bit underrated. His ability to find the space and do all these things is a little bit underrated. And as he continues to get work, remember, this is a guy, Chris Rodriguez Jr., who has not gotten consistent work throughout his entire first, 2.5 years in the National Football League. This is really the first season we've seen him start to get consistent work. And really, can we call it consistent? Yeah, it's only been 2 games. We'll see what happens this weekend. If it's kind of the same workload, then now we can kind of start seeing him or saying that he's getting that consistent workload. That is incredibly important, especially for a running back. In practice, you're not getting hit. You're not getting brought to the ground. You can work on your eyes. You can work on all those kinds of things, but it's much different when a defender can actually reach out, try to grab you by the pads, try to lunge out at your legs, do all these kinds of things. It's absolutely different. So does Chris Rodriguez Jr. have elite ceiling, like as far as like become like the next Saquon Barkley? I don't think I would put him in that category. I don't think I'd put Bill in that category right now either, though, guys. I think the difference between the two, one obviously has much more wiggle, much more burst. The other one, much more consistent in finding positive yardage. I think they both bring really good things. I think in today's NFL, what you need to do is keep them together. I think that's what you need to do. Chris Rodriguez Jr. is a free agent at the end of the season, by the way, and he certainly put some good tape on tape. He's put good play on tape, so he's going to have suitors. Like Chris Rodriguez Jr. is not a guy that if the Washington Commanders don't re-sign is not going to find an NFL home. Like he is a guy that teams are going to want to bring in. Not saying that they're going to be like, boom, you're our next starter, but they're going to want to bring him in. So I'm interested to see how aggressively the Washington Commanders go after him, do those types of things. But I think that the answer, honestly, keep Chris, keep Jacory Croskey-Merritt. Honestly, with this running back group, truthfully, and with the amount of holes this team has, I would just keep this group intact. I would keep Chris Rodriguez Jr., Jacory Croskey-Merritt, Jeremy McNichols, bring all three of those guys back this season and maybe go out and get some other undrafted free agent, maybe bring Chase Edmonds back again next year. Do whatever you got to do. But I think, honestly, this running back room has shown if the offensive line can open up the holes, they can take advantage of them. And then you have much bigger fish to fry on this roster other than the running back position. So that's just where I sit right now here at the end of November. We'll see what it looks like in March and April, right? Final question here. Insider Nick wants to ask about Treylon Burks as well. How's Treylon Burks doing? Is he going to be closer to return? Again, we'll see him for the first time on Wednesday after this episode airs. So I can't give you an exact estimation. However, I will tell you that team sources did tell us before the trip to Madrid there was a minor procedure on one of his thumbs. I don't know which thumb it was, but it was a minor procedure. If it's a minor procedure on a thumb, 3 weeks later, you figure he's going to be okay. So I expect Treylon Burks to be back out there. In fact, I've got a little bit of ask for Treylon Burks with Noah Brown, since I don't expect Noah Brown to be back, even though Noah Brown's 21-day window to return off of IR has been opened. I still don't expect Noah back this weekend, but given that the Denver Broncos have a defensive back who is prone to defensive pass interference calls, and Noah Brown is very good at drawing flags, I want Treylon Burks to get a little bit of that knowledge from Noah Brown, see if we can't get some free yardage out of the Denver Broncos defense this weekend. So that's going to lead into our crossover Thursday episode, which is the next episode of Locked On Commanders. I want to thank you for coming through for today's mailbag episode. In the meantime, between all these episodes, if you've got further questions, topics of conversation that you want to talk about with me, talk about on future mailbag episodes, whatever it is, go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become an insider today. Not only do you get to participate in all of that, but you get direct communication from me via text message. No apps, no emails, nothing, like literally just to your handy dandy cell phone. You get a text message from me giving you information in real time as much as possible. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast twice per day. Get the national view of the league and the Washington Commanders. Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you're listening to today's episode. To the everydayers, I see you. I appreciate you every single day. And I thank you specifically for coming through yet again today. Until next time, please, everybody out there, stay safe, be kind to one another. We'll talk again real soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.